It was an ordinary Wednesday night, the kind of night when no one expects the world to turn upside down. I was just finishing serving the rice when the landline rang with that dry, insistent sound only important calls make. My parents were sitting at the table, and my younger brother, Derek, was fiddling with his phone, not looking up. This seemed normal, but everything was about to change. My father answered with a hint of irritation in his voice. He didn't like people calling it dinner time. But seconds after saying hello, he paled. He was silent for a few seconds, and then simply said, "We'll figure it out." When he hung up, his hand was shaking. My mother asked what had happened, but he just looked at me, as if I were a stranger in his own house. The atmosphere changed. The once comforting smell of food now seemed cloying. My father's gaze held anger, but also disappointment. My mother, confused, looked from one to the other, trying to understand. Derek, who had been silent until then, uttered a sentence that shattered me inside. "I told you he was stealing from you." The silence that followed was so thick, I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. "What do you mean, Derek? You're talking about me?" He stared at me coldly. "You think I didn't see the activity in Dad's account? I have screenshots, and I showed them everything. That didn't make sense. I'd never touched my parents' money. In fact, I'd never even had access to that account. Share this story to reach further, subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment." I wanted to scream, cry, or simply wake up from a nightmare, but the only thing I could say was, "That's a lie." My mother squeezed my father's hand, visibly shaken, and he replied, "The bank manager confirmed it. They want to see us in person tomorrow." My world began to crumble. The only thing echoing in my mind was, why would my brother do this to me? The night passed in a blur. I barely slept. I paced around the room, trying to understand what was happening. I opened my laptop, checked my emails, tried to remember any unusual activity, but nothing. Everything was clean. I hadn't done anything, absolutely nothing. And yet, the next day, I would be treated like a thief. Around 7 a.m., I heard my dad and Derek talking in the kitchen. They were whispering, but I caught bits and pieces. "He's always been too ambitious. He thinks he can fool us. Let's settle this now." My mom was silent. When I walked in, she just looked at me with teary eyes. No one said good morning. I was a ghost in that house. We arrived at the bank at 9 o'clock sharp. The manager greeted us with a sour expression. He said there had been suspicious transactions made using my father's password, small but recurring transfers. When I asked if they had proof it was me, he simply replied, "The access was made from your IP address, and the data matches your registration." My blood ran cold. I'd never done that, but someone was using my information. On the way out, my father didn't even say a word to me. In the car, Derek took the opportunity to throw me veiled barbs. "I always thought you had two faces." My mother cried softly in the front seat. Every minute was a punch in the gut. It wasn't just about money. It was about trust. And I was losing the only thing that still held me together, my family. It was at that moment, looking in the rearview mirror and seeing my own distorted reflection, that I realized someone wanted to destroy me from the inside out. And if I hadn't been the one making those transactions, there was only one possibility left. But why? And how? These questions began to consume me, and in that instant, I knew I had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. Returning home after that visit to the bank was torture. I felt like a prisoner walking toward death row. Each step was heavier than the last. When we entered, Derek went straight to his room, as if he'd accomplished some mission. I stood in the living room, trying to understand how he could act so coldly. He was my brother, my flesh and blood. What had happened to him? My mother went to the kitchen, but without her usual light demeanor. She was curled up, emotionally drained. My father walked past me as if I were invisible. I went up to my room, but the silence screamed. I sat on the bed and began to piece together all the pieces I had. The IP address was mine. The information was mine, but it wasn't me. Someone had used my data. I thought about the old office computer we shared. I remembered that Derek had access to my room, and that he was always asking for passwords under the pretense of forgetting his. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. But the most painful question still lingered. Why would he do that? He didn't need money. Our parents took good care of us. We had everything. It was then that I remembered a fight Months ago, Derek wanted to start a YouTube channel and needed a loan from our father. He refused, saying he didn't trust it to work. At the time, Derek was furious. He said he was going to show everyone who the useless one in the house was. I thought they were just empty words, but maybe they were a promise. His hurt had turned to poison, and that poison was now being poured into me. I was paying for a rage that wasn't even mine. But how could I prove it? How could I make my parents believe their youngest son was manipulating them? I needed proof, and there was only one person who could help me get it. Leo, my best friend since high school. A computer genius. I grabbed my phone and texted, "I need you, seriously. Can you come over?" He replied within seconds, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. And it was there, in that moment, that the first spark of hope lit inside me. If anyone could help me turn this around, it was him. But we had no idea what we were about to discover. Leo arrived with his laptop and that determined look I knew so well. We sat on the floor of my room, and I explained everything. Every detail, every sentence, every expression my brother made. He listened in silence, and in the end, said only one thing. "If he used your IP address, we can track him." That was all I needed to hear. Now it was war. We started scanning the router's logs, something only Leo knew how to do. Within minutes, he had detected strange accesses coming from a laptop that wasn't mine. "That MAC address isn't from your computer or your phone," he pointed to the screen, "but it matches the old laptop from the office, the one he used when he lived at home." I nearly broke down. Leo went further. He managed to pull the exact times of the movements. All of them occurred in the early hours of the morning, between 2 and 3 a.m., and always on days when I was away, sleeping at my girlfriend's house. The pattern was clear, and, with a little more effort, he found a video automatically saved to the cloud. It was a screen recording, with Derek's face reflected in the glass in the background. Bingo. We had the proof, but the problem was, how could we show it without him finding a way to get out of it? Leo suggested a trap. "Pretend you're going to apologize. Schedule dinner at home, and I'll leave the laptop transmitting everything directly to your father's phone." It was risky, but if it worked, it would be the final blow. I agreed immediately. It was my chance to get my family back. The next day, I went to Derek. He said he wanted to talk, that he'd reflected and wanted to start over. He smiled, a strange smile, as if he knew he'd won. We made a dinner date. My mother looked relieved but suspicious. My father remained silent, and while everyone got ready, Leo set up his laptop in mirror mode, hidden among the books on the living room shelf. That night, the tension could have been cut with a knife. We all sat at the table, and Derek began to speak. But instead of apologizing, he boasted, "It's funny how people will believe anything when they're afraid of being betrayed." My father stopped chewing. My mother looked at him, startled. I, silent, just waited for the right moment. What came next would change everything. As Derek bragged, my heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the silverware hitting the plates. My father was paralyzed. My mother seemed entranced, and Derek kept talking, growing more confident. "If I can't have what I want, no one will. You've always given him everything." He laughed, a mocking, venomous laugh. It revolted me, but I took a deep breath. Leo, outside the house, texted me. "Transmission working. He's listening to everything." My father discreetly took his phone from his pocket. When he looked at the screen, something changed in his face. It was as if a blindfold had fallen off. He was finally seeing, and hearing, the truth with his own eyes, and his expression filled with fury and disappointment. It was then that Derek uttered the words that sealed his fate. "They'll never find out. Only an idiot would leave a trace, and I didn't leave any." At that moment, my father stood up, slowly, staring at his own son. Derek's smile stopped. "Dad? What's wrong?" My father placed his phone on the table, the video playing in real time. The reflection of Derek's face in the recording felt like a punch to the chest. My mother covered her mouth in disbelief. "Oh my God, Derek, it was you." And he, for the first time, stuttered. He tried to make something up, but it was too late. The truth was there, stark and raw. He tried to explain himself, blamed the system, said he just wanted recognition. But there was no justification that could erase what he'd done. The silence was different now. It wasn't doubt. It was shock. My father was furious, but he didn't yell. He just said, "You stole our family's trust. That's worse than any amount of money." And he left the room. My mother cried, motionless. I didn't know what to say either. The plan had worked, yes, but the victory tasted bitter. It was as if I had won a war and at the same time, lost part of what made me whole. Derek ran out of the house. No one tried to stop him. The door slammed shut. And there, amidst the cold dishes and harsh words, dinner ended. I stood there, trying to understand how things had gotten this far. I never imagined the most painful betrayal would come from the person who grew up in the next room. But there it was, raw, and with no turning back. The next day was the quietest of my life. Derek didn't come back. My dad didn't go to work. And my mom spent the whole morning on the couch, staring into space. The video was still saved on my dad's phone, like an open wound. Leo came over and asked if I was okay. I just shook my head, because no, I wasn't. And I didn't even know when I would be. I got a text from Derek. "You destroyed my life." I stared at the screen for long minutes. I could have replied, said he did it alone, that I'd only revealed the truth, but I deleted the text. This wasn't about convincing anyone anymore. It was about moving on, and I didn't know how to do that yet. My father finally spoke to me late that afternoon. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." That hurt more than I expected. Seeing his remorse made me realize how much this story had hurt everyone. We trusted him because he was our youngest son. We thought he wasn't capable, and I understood. I thought so too. Later, I sat with my mother. She held my hand and said, "Nothing will be the same, but we can start over." For the first time in days, I felt like crying, not out of anger, but out of relief. The truth, however painful, had cleared the way. Now it was up to us to rebuild, even with missing pieces. We got a call from Derek's school. He'd requested a transfer. And soon after, a message from my uncle saying Derek was staying with him temporarily. My parents didn't know what to make of it. I only knew one thing. I didn't want to live in fear anymore. The worst had already happened. Now it was just a matter of looking forward. As the sun set that night, my father called us for dinner. Just the three of us. The food was simple. The silence was still there, but less heavy. Little by little, the house began to breathe again, and I realized that, even with the scars, it was still possible to rebuild what was left. But Derek, he was now an absence no one knew how to fill. Time passed, but the wound didn't heal as quickly as everyone expected. Derek's presence was felt in every corner of the house. His room remained locked, untouched. My mother sometimes paused at the door, as if waiting for him to return. My father immersed himself in work, and I felt torn between relief and guilt. Even though I knew I'd done the right thing, the void he'd left hurt. Neighbors started talking. Some thought he'd run away because of drugs. Others said I'd set him up. Social media wasn't helping either. Derek posted a video saying he was kicked out of the house out of jealousy of his perfect brother. His narrative was different, and many people believed it. I received hateful messages, accusations, even threats. My mother defended me as best she could. But what really hurt me was my brother's silence. He had the chance to tell the truth, to acknowledge what he did, but he chose to throw more mud at me. I spent hours reading the comments on his videos. Some people said, "I understand you. I was also betrayed by my family." It was insane. He became a martyr of lies. Leo warned me, "Dude, stop torturing yourself. Those who need to know the truth already know." And he was right, but it was hard to let go. Because it wasn't just about reputation. It was about my identity. The doubt he'd planted still echoed within me. Could I have done things differently? Was I too harsh? Our minds are cruel when the trauma is still fresh. My parents started couples therapy. I joined too. Each session was a broken mirror slowly being glued back together. We discovered many things we hadn't seen before. The silent favoritism toward Derek. The pressure they put on me because I was the oldest. The truth is, the bomb had been planted for years. I was just the final target. I started writing everything down. Every memory, every feeling. Putting it down on paper helped me breathe. It was like clearing the rubble of an earthquake. And in the midst of it all, I realized something. My story didn't have to end at that dinner. It could be the beginning of something bigger. Something that, perhaps, would help others face their own hidden pain. One day, I woke up to a notification on my phone. It was an Instagram direct message. "I know you told the truth. I saw everything." It was from a girl I didn't know. I went to her profile. She was Derek's ex-girlfriend. They'd never officially confirmed anything, but she said they'd met shortly before everything happened, and that he'd told her the whole plan, laughing. She continued, "At the time, I kept quiet because he threatened me, but I can't stand to see you crucified anymore." My heart raced. This was further proof. and coming from someone who had nothing to gain from it. She sent me screenshots of conversations, phrases like, "I'm going to turn the tables and turn him against his parents. I want to see him prove he didn't do anything." It was brutal. I called Leo immediately. He was shocked by what he read. "This seals everything, man. With this, no one can deny it anymore." I considered showing it to my parents, but something inside me urged calm. I needed to decide. Take this to the police? Expose it online? Or just keep it as a shield? The decision wasn't simple. It had real implications, and still open wounds. I showed them to my parents. My mother cried when she read the messages. "Oh my God, he planned everything." My father was silent. After a few minutes, he said, "Maybe he needs help more than we realized." It was the first time I'd heard empathy from them toward Derek since the explosion, but it wasn't an excuse. It was simply an acknowledgement of the chaos he'd created. I decided not to expose it. That would be revenge, and I didn't want to live with that anymore. But I promised myself that if he ever publicly attacked me again, I would use everything. What I wanted now was peace, and the truth, even silent, was already my protection. I no longer needed to convince anyone. I knew who I was, and that was enough. I cleared my notifications, took a deep breath, and went for a walk. For the first time in weeks, I felt the wind on my face without a weight on my chest. The pain was still there, but something new was emerging inside. Freedom. And this freedom was born from the most unfair pain I've ever faced, but also from the courage to not keep quiet, even when everything seemed against me. A few weeks later, while drinking coffee alone, I got another call. It was my uncle. His voice was serious but calm. "Your brother wants to talk to you." My stomach turned. I hadn't expected this. Since leaving home, Derek hadn't shown any sign of regret. And now, out of the blue, he wanted to talk? I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I said, "Okay, tell me where and when." We met at a park near my uncle's house. I went with a heavy heart. I replayed everything in my head. The dinner, the video, the accusations. I took the evidence with me, just in case. I arrived at the agreed time. Derek was already there, sitting on a bench, his gaze lost. He didn't seem like the same arrogant boy from weeks ago. He seemed smaller, more fragile, almost unrecognizable. "Thanks for coming," he said, not looking at me. I remained silent. He took a deep breath. "I messed up. I just wanted you guys to see me. I always felt like I was the family's mistake." That caught me off guard. I hadn't expected to hear that. He began to tell me how everything had gotten out of control, how the plan was just a rant that became reality. And that, when he realized it, it was already too late. "I hated you for so long, for no real reason. Because you were always perfect, and I just wanted to be seen." His voice cracked. He cried. For real. For the first time, he wasn't acting. It was my broken brother before me. And there, in that moment, between two strangers who were once brothers, a space was born for something new. The possibility of forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't immediate. I looked him in the eye and said, "I don't want to see you as an enemy, but I can't trust you like I used to." He nodded. "I know, and I don't expect that now. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." We parted with a timid handshake. It was awkward, but necessary. It was the beginning of rebuilding, or at least the end of the war. I went home and told my parents. They cried. They didn't know if it was time to get closer or not. But one thing was certain. Something had changed. Derek was still a question mark, but for the first time in a long time, there was something different in the air. Not trust, but humanity. And sometimes that's a good start. After that encounter in the park, things didn't go back to normal, but they started moving, slowly. My parents decided to keep in touch with Derek, but cautiously. Short conversations, sporadic messages. No one was ready to pretend nothing happened, but they also didn't want to carry a grudge for the rest of their lives. It was like learning to walk again after an accident. I continued with my routine, trying to reconnect with myself. I went back to school, got involved in personal projects, and started hanging out with friends more. The trauma was still there, but little by little it gave way to something new. Maturity. This story forced me to grow. It taught me that family is made of daily choices, not just blood. Leo and I grew even closer. He said, "Dude, your story is a movie." Literally. And that's when the idea came. I decided to write it all down, but this time for real. I started writing the script, turning the pain into a narrative. Every scene, every sentence, every detail. Not to attack my brother, but to show that even within one's own home, the truth can be distorted, and yet, it can prevail. I posted the video on a small channel I created, unpretentiously, just with the title, "My brother said I stole from my parents," but the truth was different. Within hours, the video started circulating. Comments poured in. People told similar stories. Others said they cried. Others thanked me for talking about something so real. It touched me deeply. And that's how I realized my pain had become purpose. What had nearly destroyed me had become something that could help others. The story that began with a dinner interrupted by a phone call was now serving to reunite families, heal wounds, and give voice to those who had been silenced within their own homes. And that is priceless. It was a cloudy Sunday. I was on the porch, reading the comments on the video I'd posted, when I heard the gate slam. I got up slowly, without any expectations. But when I saw who was on the other side, my heart raced. It was Derek, alone, with a backpack on his back, and his face, haggard. He looked like he'd aged years in just a few weeks. We stared at each other for a few seconds. My mother appeared soon after. When she saw her son, she put her hand to her mouth. "Derek," he simply said, "I needed to see you." My father left the kitchen and stood in the hallway. Time froze. No one knew whether to hug, scream, or cry. It was like reliving it all over again, but different, because now, the words carried weight, and the actions carried awareness. He asked to come in. We all sat in the living room, each in a corner, and he started talking. He told me where he was living, that he was working with a friend of my uncle's, and that he was in therapy. "I'm trying to understand myself, fix what's broken." His voice trembled. It no longer had that manipulative tone. It was just raw regret and vulnerability. "I know I can't erase what I did, but I want you to know I carry this every day, and I will carry it forever." My mother wept. My father listened silently, as if digesting every word. I watched, unsure whether to hug him or keep him at a distance. It was strange to see the one who caused so much pain, wanting to rebuild. Derek handed us a letter. He said he wrote it on one of his worst days. It was a confession, a plea for forgiveness, and a vent. He said he didn't expect redemption, but wanted to make room for a new story. "I don't want to live here again, but I want to be able to be a part of this again." My mother held his hand, and my father, after a long silence, said, "We can try." There was no celebration, no wide smiles, but there was a beginning, a new kind of beginning, one where everyone was aware of the weight they carried, but willing to not let that weight define the future. Derek left late in the afternoon, and for the first time in months, when the gate closed, it wasn't with pain, it was with hope. Over time, we began to develop a new dynamic. Derek began to visit the house gradually. Short dinners, cautious conversations. Nothing was forced. Each step was taken carefully. It was like rebuilding a bridge after a war. The foundations were shaky, but the desire to reconnect was real, and that made all the difference. I continued with my channel. The video went viral, millions of views. I was invited to podcasts, interviews, events about mental health and family relationships. And each time I told the story, I felt a weight lifted. Not because I forgot, but because turning pain into conversation is liberating. It's like saying, "I survived, and you can too." Derek texted me one day, "I watched your video. It hurt, but thanks for telling me." That shattered me. It was the validation I didn't even know I needed. He didn't question, he didn't attack, he didn't play the victim. He just acknowledged it. And that, for me, was one of the greatest gestures of change he could offer. The truth, finally, was a common ground between us. My parents changed too, more present, more attentive. They understood how small silences create huge holes over time. We started having conversations we'd never had before, about feelings, pressures, expectations. What was once a broken family became a conscious family, still scarred, yes, but willing to learn from them. And me? I've learned that being fair won't always spare you pain, but it will spare you guilt. I looked back at the boy who stood up at dinner with the world crumbling around him and realized he was never the same again. And thank goodness, because today I'm stronger, more real, and even with everything that's happened, I wouldn't change who I've become for anything. Today when I look back, it's still hard to believe everything that happened. The interrupted dinner, the accusations, the pain, the loneliness. I never imagined I'd have to prove my innocence in my own home. I never imagined my brother's voice would become the cruelest weapon against me, but life has strange ways of testing us and revealing us. I learned that the truth, no matter how stifled, always finds a way to breathe. Sometimes it comes with proof, sometimes with silence, and sometimes with tears. It wasn't easy, it wasn't pretty, but it was real. And it transformed me. It forced me to look within, to understand my strength, and to discover that justice isn't revenge, it's clarity. My relationship with Derek will never be the same again, but today, it's honest, and that's worth more than pretending to be harmonious. My parents are now more present, more attentive, and me? I continue to use my voice to tell stories that matter, because I know that on the other side of the screen, there might be someone going through exactly what I experienced, and thinking they're alone. This story began with betrayal, but it ends with rebuilding, with truth, with connection. It's not about a happy ending. It's about a sincere new beginning, because sometimes the greatest proof of love you can give yourself is not giving up on who you are, even when the world tries to erase you, even when your own family questions you. So if you've made it this far, take this with you. The truth doesn't need applause to be real. It just needs to endure. And if you're going through something similar, don't be silent. Speak up. Scream if you must. Because when you choose the truth, you choose freedom. And no lie survives that for long. If this story touched you in any way, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and help this message reach more people. Comment below where you are listening from. I read each one with care. And remember, the truth may hurt, but it sets you free. Thanks for sticking around until the end. See you in the next video.